There comes a moment in some people's lives when they finally get everything they once prayed for and feel absolutely nothing. No joy, no peace, no relief, just silence. A strange, empty silence. And that silence can be more terrifying than failure, because failure at least gives you something to fight. But what do you do when you win and still feel lost? Why do some people build fortunes, buy the dream house, hit every goal they ever set, only to wake up hollow? And why do other people with far less money, far less status, and far fewer possessions wake up at 90 years old, smiling, grateful to be alive, excited for the day ahead? On a small Japanese island called Okinawa, where some of the happiest and longest living people in the world have spent centuries answering that question, there is a word for it: Ikigai. The reason you wake up in the morning, the reason life still feels worth living. But here is where most people get it wrong. In the West, we turned Ikigai into a career diagram, a neat little formula, a productivity tool, a way to find the perfect job. And in doing that, we completely missed its soul. Because real Ikigai is not about finding the ideal profession. It is about remembering why your life matters when success stops exciting you. It is about knowing what still gives your existence weight when money, achievement, and recognition lose their shine. And no one learned that lesson more painfully than a man named Michael. Chapter 1. The Promise That Built His Life. Michael grew up in a lower middle-class family in rural America. His father was a mechanic. His mother worked as a secretary. 3 brothers shared one room. There was never enough money, but there was always just enough hope to keep going. Then one year, when Michael was 12, his father lost his job. Michael never forgot that night. His mother stood in the kitchen crying quietly, trying to decide whether the family should pay the electric bill or buy groceries. His father sat outside on the porch, staring into the dark with the expression of a man who had stopped believing he could protect the people he loved. That image burned itself into Michael's mind. And that night he made a promise. I will never let my family live like this again. That promise became fuel, not inspiration, not motivation. Fuel. He studied obsessively, won scholarships, graduated with a degree in engineering, joined a tech startup right out of college. And then he worked like a man possessed. 16-hour days, weekends, no vacations, no real sleep. His friends would tell him to slow down. His girlfriend would ask why he was never really there. And Michael always gave the same answer. You don't understand. I'm doing this for my family. 5 years later, the startup sold. Michael was 28 years old and he had $3.2 million in the bank. The promise he made at 12 had come true. He bought his mother a house, he paid off his father's debts, he helped his brothers through college. That night, alone in his luxury apartment, Michael sat on the couch and waited for the feeling he thought would finally arrive. Victory, peace, happiness, it never came. He had spent his entire life running toward this moment. And when he finally reached it, he felt empty. That was the first crack. But instead of stopping to understand it, Michael did what most high performers do when they feel inner emptiness. He ran harder. Chapter 2. When the goal replaces the reason. Michael told himself the emptiness was temporary. Maybe he just needed a bigger challenge, a new target, a new mountain. So he started again. New company, new goals, new milestones, 10 million, then 20, then 50. At 30, he married Sarah. It was a beautiful wedding. Warm light, close friends, real joy. For a moment, life seemed balanced. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Emma. Michael was in a conference room when he got the call. He rushed to the hospital, held his daughter in his arms, cried, felt something real, then went back to work the next day. That should tell you everything. Sarah saw what was happening before he did. "You don't need to do this anymore," she told him one night. "We have enough money for 3 lifetimes. Stay home. Be here." But Michael couldn't hear her. He was still 12 years old in his mind, standing in that kitchen, trying to save his family from poverty. So he said the same thing he had always said. "I'm doing this for you, for Emma, so she never has to worry." But Emma didn't need another zero in a bank account. She needed a father. Sarah didn't need more financial security. She needed a husband who was present enough to eat dinner without checking his phone. By the time Michael was 38, he had $47 million, multiple businesses, properties in 4 states, and a life that looked extraordinary from the outside. Inside, it was collapsing. Sarah filed for divorce. Emma, now 6 years old, barely knew him. He sat in his office one night surrounded by awards, framed magazine covers, and polished signs of success, and felt nothing. Success had turned to ash in his mouth. At 2 a.m., alone in a dark office, Michael typed one sentence into Google. Why does nothing matter anymore? That search changed his life. Chapter 3. The Island That Knew the Answer. Somewhere between articles on burnout and depression, Michael found a piece about Okinawa. At first he clicked because of longevity. He had heard the island was famous for people living well into their 90s and beyond. But what caught his attention was not age, it was joy. The article described old fishermen waking before sunrise smiling, grandmothers gardening at 92, men in their 90s still walking every day with quiet energy and purpose. And one sentence stopped him cold. In Okinawa, people do not retire from life because they have a reason to wake up. That reason was called Ikigai. Michael kept reading, then read 10 more articles, then bought books. And the more he learned, the more he realized something devastating. He had spent 26 years confusing a tool for a purpose. Money was supposed to help him protect the people he loved. But somewhere along the way, money itself became the goal. And goals have a dangerous weakness. Once you achieve them, they stop giving life meaning. That was Michael's real problem. He didn't lose his purpose because he failed. He lost it because he succeeded in the wrong thing. One story in particular haunted him. A 94-year-old Okinawan fisherman who still woke before dawn every morning to go out to sea. Not because he needed money. His children were financially successful. They begged him to stop, but he kept going. Why? Because the fish he brought back fed the community. Because his grandchildren waited for his stories. Because his life still connected him to something larger than himself. His Ikigai was not fishing. It was being needed in a meaningful way, being part of life, being part of others. Michael read that and felt something inside him collapse. Money did not need him. Money did not miss him. Money did not care if he woke up tomorrow. But his daughter would. His wife had. His parents still did. And for the first time, he had to face the possibility that he had not just built the wrong life. He had built it brilliantly. Michael spent the next 2 days reading everything he could about Okinawa and Ikigai. At first, he thought he had found a framework, something useful, something he could analyze, something he could optimize. That was his old habit, turn every truth into a system, turn every human problem into a strategy. But the deeper he read, the more uncomfortable he became, because real Ikigai was not a tool, it was an accusation. It was forcing him to ask one question he had avoided his entire life. Why do I actually wake up in the morning? And for the first time in decades, he did not like the answer. For 26 years, Michael had been waking up for money, not because money was evil, because money had quietly become his identity. At 12, money meant safety. At 28, it meant success. At 38, it meant momentum. But somewhere between protecting his family and building an empire, he stopped noticing that the original purpose had died. And when a purpose dies but the behavior stays alive, what remains is emptiness wearing expensive clothes. That realization wrecked him. He read about a 94-year-old Okinawan fisherman named Mr. Masato who still went out to sea every morning before sunrise. Not because he had to. His children had money. His grandchildren begged him to stay home. But he kept going. Because the fish he brought back fed people he cared about. Because the sea still gave structure to his day. Because his grandchildren waited for his stories. His reason for waking up was not work. It was relationship, usefulness, presence. Michael stared at that story for a long time. Then he looked around his house. The clean, modern kitchen no one used. The dining table where family dinners had almost disappeared. The office that had replaced the living room. The silence. And for the first time, he admitted something terrible. He had spent 26 years solving a problem that no longer existed. At 12, his family needed money. At 38, they did not. At 12, his promise made sense. At 38, that same promise had become a prison. Because his wife and daughter did not need more protection from poverty. They needed him. And he was still absent, still chasing numbers, still calling it love. That afternoon, he called Sarah. Not to negotiate, not to defend himself, just to tell the truth. When she answered, her voice was cautious. Hey, he said. A long silence followed. Then Michael said the one sentence he had never said clearly before. I forgot why I was doing all of this. Sarah said nothing, so he continued. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Emma, giving us security. But somewhere along the way I stopped protecting anyone. I was just running. Still silence. Then finally she spoke. Michael, we never asked you for this. Her voice wasn't angry. That made it worse. Emma doesn't need a $10 million trust fund, she said. She needs a father who shows up for breakfast. And I didn't need a bigger house. I needed a husband who could sit at dinner without checking his phone every 4 minutes. Michael closed his eyes, because every word was true. He had built a private story in which he was the sacrificial hero carrying everything for everyone. But no one had asked for the version of sacrifice he chose. And in that realization, he met another brutal truth. He had not just neglected his family, he had neglected his entire life. He had no real friendships left, no physical health worth speaking of, high blood pressure, extra weight, terrible sleep, constant stress. He had stopped going to church years ago. He had stopped doing anything that had no monetary return. He had optimized himself right out of being human. That night, sitting alone, he understood the deepest humiliation of all. He had not won. He had simply become extremely efficient at losing the right things, the hardest part of change. Understanding the problem is painful. Changing is worse, because change requires something the ego hates. Admitting that you wasted years, maybe decades. And once you see that clearly, you face a new choice. Keep running in the wrong direction because stopping hurts too much. Or stop, feel the pain, and turn around. Michael's entire body resisted that second option. Slowing down felt dangerous, it felt irresponsible, it felt weak. But beneath all those excuses was something else, terror. Because if he stopped, he would have to find out who he was without work. And he had no idea. Still he began, not dramatically, not all at once. The first thing he asked Sarah for was not another chance at marriage. It was something smaller and harder. A chance to learn how to be present. She was quiet for a long time. Then he added, I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I'm asking if I can spend time with Emma, consistently, even if it's only a few hours a week. Sarah hesitated. She had every reason to, but she heard something in his voice that had not been there for years. Not confidence, not persuasion. Need. She said yes. So every Saturday morning, Michael picked up Emma. At first, it was awkward, painfully awkward. He did not know how to talk to his own daughter without turning the interaction into a performance. He tried buying things for her. Fancy breakfasts, toys, surprises. Emma accepted them politely, but she did not light up until the first Saturday he did something radically different. He put his phone away, completely, then sat on the floor and played dolls with her for an hour without once checking a screen. At one point, she looked at him strangely and said, "Daddy, you look different today." That sentence nearly broke him, because she was right. For the first time in years, he was not providing. He was there, and he realized how foreign that had become. Week 2, he started walking 20 minutes every morning, not to get shredded, not to optimize his lifespan, just to feel his body moving again. Week 3, he called his father and asked him to meet for coffee. It had been years since they had spoken honestly. They sat together in a diner booth, both of them careful at first. Then his father asked, "How are you really?" And this time Michael did not give the polished answer. "Lost," he said. His father nodded slowly, then said something Michael would never forget. "You spent your whole life trying not to become me." Michael looked up. "When I lost my job," his father said, "you saw defeat. You made a promise to never live like that. But son, in trying to avoid my kind of failure, you created your own." Michael was silent. His father stirred his coffee. "You were so afraid of losing what matters that you forgot what matters." That sentence stayed with him for weeks, because once again it was true. He had been running from one fear for so long that he never noticed he had built his life around it. And then things got harder. Because when one person changes, everyone around them is forced to react. Some people disappear, some resist, some mock the change. Michael's business partners were among the first. "You're distracted," one of them said. "You've lost your edge." Another asked, "What happened to you?" He knew what they really meant. Why are you no longer sacrificing everything the way we are? Friends who used to call when he was a rising success story suddenly became less available when he started saying no to status games. Some relationships had been built on access to his momentum, not love for who he was. That hurt, but it also clarified things. Slowly, Michael began stepping away. He exited 2 of his 3 companies, kept one, reduced his involvement. His partners thought he was insane. "You're throwing away money," one of them said. Michael looked at him and replied, "No, I've been throwing away life. I'm just finally paying attention to the exchange rate." And here was the surprising part. His material quality of life barely changed. When you already have more than enough, more stops changing anything. But free time, presence, health, peace, those changed everything. 6 months after he began this process, Michael woke up one Saturday and felt something he had not felt in over 20 years. Not adrenaline, not urgency, not pressure, desire. A quiet desire to wake up and live the day, because Emma was coming over, because he was taking a walk with his father, because he was having lunch with 2 real friends. Because for once, life was not waiting on the other side of success. Life was already here, and that was when he began to understand his Ikigai. Not one thing, several. Emma, his health, his parents, faith, presence, service. But with that understanding came the darkest companion of all, regret. And in the next phase of this journey, regret would either destroy him or teach him how to live. Finding purpose feels like a breakthrough, but there's a truth no one prepares you for. When you finally see what matters, you also see what you've lost, and that realization doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like grief. Chapter 3. The years you can't get back. About a year into his transformation, Michael sat alone one night doing something he had avoided his entire life. He calculated. Emma was 8 years old. He had missed the first 6 years of her life. 6 years that would never come back. First words, first steps, first school days. He wasn't there. He was in meetings, answering emails, closing deals that no longer meant anything. He looked at Sarah, 8 years of marriage, and he realized something painful. He had been physically present, but emotionally absent. How many dinners had he ruined with his phone? How many conversations had he half listened to? How many moments had he treated as interruptions instead of life? Then his parents. His father was now in his late 60s. His mother not far behind. Best case, maybe 20 years left, maybe less. And Michael had already spent 26 years not being there. That realization hit harder than any business loss ever could. Because money can be regained. Time cannot. And for the first time in his life, Michael had to face a truth that changed everything. You can be alive and still not be living. Chapter 4. Regret or responsibility. Most people, when they feel this level of regret, do one of two things. They either deny it or they drown in it. Michael chose something different. He decided to use regret as a compass, not to punish himself, but to guide what came next. But here's where most people make another mistake. When they realize they've lost time, they try to compensate by overcorrecting. They go from one extreme to another, from absence to obsession, from workaholic to overcompensating parent, from neglect to pressure. Michael almost fell into that trap, but then he remembered something he had read about Okinawa. The people who live the longest and happiest lives don't give everything to one thing. They distribute their energy across multiple sources of meaning. They don't chase balance as perfection. They practice balance as intention. So Michael did something unusual. He restructured his life, not emotionally but intentionally, not perfectly but consciously. Work still mattered, but only as a tool. Family became a priority, but without suffocation. Health became non-negotiable. Faith returned as something grounding. Community and mentoring entered his life. It wasn't about percentages, it was about awareness. Every Sunday night, he sat down and asked himself simple questions. Was I present with Emma? Did Sarah feel seen? Did I take care of my body? Did I connect with my parents? Did I do something meaningful beyond myself? If the answer was no in any area, he adjusted the next week. Not with guilt, with clarity. Because Ikigai is not something you find once. It's something you practice daily. Chapter 5. When success tries to pull you back. Just when life began to feel whole again, something unexpected happened. Success came back. New opportunities, new investors, new momentum. And with it, the old voice returned. You're falling behind. You could be earning more. You're wasting your potential. That voice had controlled him for 26 years, but now he saw it clearly. It wasn't truth. It was conditioning. It was the habit of measuring life through accumulation. One night, sitting at dinner with Sarah and Emma, laughing, present, alive, that voice whispered again, "You're losing money right now." Michael looked around, at his daughter smiling, at Sarah relaxed and happy, at the quiet peace of the moment. And he asked himself one question. Losing compared to what? Compared to more money, more status, more numbers that don't change how you feel? For the first time, he didn't listen, because he had learned something powerful. Ambition without direction becomes addiction, and addiction never ends. The goal just keeps moving. But Ikigai doesn't move. It anchors you. Chapter 6. The moment that changes everything. 2 years into this new life, Emma had a school play, a small one, nothing important. At least that's what the old Michael would have said. That day, he had a major meeting scheduled, a deal that could bring in millions. 3 years earlier, he would have sent someone else to record the play. Watched it later at 2 times speed, called it being present. This time, he canceled the meeting. He sat in the front row, watched fully. When Emma walked onto the stage, she scanned the crowd. Then she saw him. Her face lit up. After the play, she ran toward him and said, "Daddy, you came." That sentence hit harder than any financial milestone he had ever achieved. Because for the first time, he believed his own presence mattered. Not his money, not his success, him. And that's when he understood something most people realize too late. No one at the end of their life wishes they had worked more, but almost everyone wishes they had lived more. Chapter 7. The real meaning of wealth. 5 years into this journey, Michael's life looked very different. He made less money, much less, but his life was infinitely richer. His relationships were real, his health was strong, his mind was calm, his purpose was clear. When someone asked him in an interview, "Do you regret leaving money on the table?" he smiled and said, "I didn't leave money on the table. I exchanged money for life." That answer never got published. Because it made people uncomfortable. It forced them to question their own choices. And most people aren't ready for that. Chapter 8. The final lesson. Years later, Michael volunteered at a hospital. He sat with people who were nearing the end of their lives. He listened, didn't teach, didn't advise, just listened. One day, a man with 2 weeks left to live said something that confirmed everything. "I wish I had said I love you more. I wish I had hugged tighter. I wish I had fought less over things that didn't matter." Not one mention of money, not one mention of status, only moments. That's when Michael fully understood. In the end, people don't count money, they count memories. Chapter 9. The life he almost missed. Years later, Michael sat on a beach in Okinawa with Sarah and Emma. Waves crashing, sky full of stars, silence. Emma looked at him and said, "Dad, why don't we do this more often?" He smiled. "We will." "Promise?" He paused, because he had broken promises before. Then he said, "This time, I mean it." And for the first time in his life, he believed himself. The truth you can't ignore. Ikigai is not complicated. It's brutally simple. If your reason to wake up is money, you will eventually wake up empty. If your reason is connection, purpose, presence, you will wake up full, even without everything. Michael didn't become rich. He became complete, and that's the difference. Because in the end, you have 2 choices. Spend your life achieving everything and feel nothing, or spend your life living fully and feel everything that matters. The choice was always yours. You just didn't see it. Now you do.